Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today's very special guest, Sherwood Park's finest, all the way from the beautiful province of Alberta, is TSN Bureau reporter for Edmonton, Ryan Rishaug. Ryan, I'm really glad that we're able to connect and that I'm able to have you on as a guest on today's show. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Yeah, Matthias, thanks so much for inviting me, man. You were persistent. I appreciate that. I've been a bit of a moving target for the last couple of months because I was really busy with the Stanley Cup playoffs and with everything going on in the draft. So, but I appreciate you being persistent, and I was really happy to join you here, man. So, yeah, I love your background, by the way. That's familiar. That
No,
looks familiar to me.
it is a little familiar to you, I guess. You've been working at TSN for a little bit of time. The
Yeah,
years fly by in the blink of an eye, I think, right?
just a little bit of time. I was thinking about this the other day, Matthias. I think it's 19 years now, which is kind of mind numbing for me. Like the time, I just can't believe how fast the time's gone by. But yeah, 19 years at TSN. I think it's like 22 or 23 here in Edmonton. Like it just feels like yesterday I was like the young guy breaking in, trying to, apply for jobs places. And everybody always said, well, you need experience. And I remember I was thinking, like, well, how can I get experience if you won't hire me? I was all frustrated. And now I'm sitting here like 2 decades in. It's just like, it just blows your mind how fast the time goes by.
Throwing back all the way to those early days of Friday Night Football and doing sideline reporting for the Edmonton Eskimos of the time, I'm sure that seems like it was just, not even yesteryear as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I still do a lot of that, right? Like, that's part of the gig here in Edmonton. I take a little bit of time off in the summer, so I tend to get to the Elks closer to September, give or take. But yeah, man, it's been a couple of decades of working on the sidelines, working on CFL broadcasts, covering the Oilers, covering the football team, going wherever TSN needs me to go to cover whatever hockey events are happening. I've been to, I don't even know how many Stanley Cup finals, Olympics drafts, all-star games, board of governor meetings. It's been really cool to be able to live in Edmonton, but be used by TSN to travel all over the world, world championships, just to cover all kinds of different hockey events. So I've been really fortunate in that I've been able to do a lot of that stuff from Edmonton here. Like I never had to move out to Toronto to get some of the good hockey gigs.
Now, I must ask you, as someone who's a native to, or I guess at least close to Edmonton, how have you enjoyed life there? Because a lot of people from the outside, and I'm in Winnipeg and I've lived across Western Canada, lived in Toronto, and people talk about, oh, well, Edmonton's a terrible city or Winnipeg's a terrible city. But have you had a terrible experience living in Edmonton? I mean,
No, man, no. Like, but this is home for me too, right? I mean, I was
yeah.
born here. I spent a few years growing up here. I got family here. I mean, this is where I'm from. So, if I grew up in Vancouver, would I move to Edmonton and think, oh, what an amazingly beautiful city? Maybe not, considering where I'd be from, Vancouver. But listen, man, it's all about what you want, right? Like, what do you want in a city? What do you want in your surroundings? If you want ocean, well, this isn't the place for you. Neither is Winnipeg. If you want mostly summer, well, this isn't the place for you. Neither is Winnipeg. If you want 4 seasons that keep you and your children hardy and thick-skinned, then this is a great place for you. If you want to be a few hours drive from the mountains to go skiing and to go hiking and to go kayaking and, to go mountain golfing, then this is the place for you. If you want to be able to buy a nice big house and not have to spend $2.5 million, then this is the place for you. If you want to have a quality of life, that is probably as high as just about anywhere, considering the cost of living generally, then this is the place for you. So it's like, what are you looking for, man? If you're looking for a boardwalk, a seawall to walk on for, an hour every night before bed, you're not going to be in the right place. Listen, it's home for me, man. I love it here. My people are here. I'm from here. I love the people here. I love this city. Love everything about it. Does it have its warts? Yes. Do I care? No. Does it bother me when other people crap on this city? No, because they don't live here and they don't really know.
That's a great way to put it. It depends on what you want. And Edmonton does have its positives. I know that people give flack for all the things that cities in Western Canada don't have, minus the province of BC, of course. But if you want to own a house, then, Edmonton's maybe not a bad city to live in compared to the other places in Canada. But there's always pros and cons to everywhere you live. And I think that there's no place like home. no matter what. Even if you're from
Exactly.
Thunder Bay or Kenora, or if you're from Fort McMurray, there's always something special at home, even if people love to rag on it.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, I'll make everyone out there a deal. I won't crap on your home city if you don't crap on mine. There's great places about everywhere. It's about people. It's about family. I raised my kids in this town, man. Like this is home for me. So I don't know. I'm just not one of those guys that goes picking apart other people's places and where they're from. And when I hear people getting down on Edmonton and stuff, it's like, oh, whatever, it's fine. Just, yeah, fine. Don't like it. Don't come here. We'll keep it quiet. We'll keep our property taxes lower and our housing costs down, because everybody, if everybody wants to think that, that's great. We'll sit here and we'll relax and we'll enjoy it.
As you've moved on in your career, you talk about feeling like it was just yesterday you started. A lot of people who start in sports media understand that it's a grind. You got to work long hours, evenings, weekends, miss a lot of things. And it's really important to be career focused when you're starting. But I think there comes a time when those goals and priorities change. Now, you have a family. You said you've raised your kids in Edmonton. You've lived your whole life. At what point did you realize that maybe chasing the highest high in your career wasn't as big of a deal anymore compared to being with your family? And how did you work that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it happened fairly early on in my tenure. Like when I graduate, well, I didn't graduate. When I left broadcasting school and took a full-time job, I was like 21, I think. And then 22, 23, 24, I kind of chased it for a few years. And that's how I built my way to Edmonton. And then when I got a job at TSN, I was a new father. So I was a first-time dad. And I think I had another one on the way. I had another one that was about to be born. And part of the gig early on at TSN was lots of travel. And that was okay. I had to do what I had to do. I spent lots of time on the road in my first 10, 12 years at TSN. But the nice thing about the job was when I was home, I was home and I didn't have a 9 to 5 that I had to work necessarily either. So I think what I would say is whatever situation you find yourself in, you have to do the best you can to balance work and life. And, hopefully you love what you do so that you're happy when you're at work, but then you can leave your work behind and enjoy your time at home. And you just do the best you can to balance that out. So listen, when TSN first hired me, I made it really clear to my boss who was hiring me. I said, if you're hiring me, to eventually move me to Toronto, then don't hire me, because I'm not making that move. I'm where I want to be. I'm Western Canadian. I want to stay in Western Canada. I want to accomplish as much as I can from Western Canada. And I didn't want to pick my family up and move them across the country away from their extended family and my extended family. And it's just not something I wanted to do. I thought it was too important to raise my kids with family around. And so that was a sacrifice that I made. I was never willing to make that move and go to Toronto, where probably there might have been different opportunities for me. But don't regret it for a second. I've probably left some opportunity and probably some cash on the table over 2 decades. But doesn't matter, because my kids, they're close with their cousins, and my mom lives a couple blocks away, and I've got a great family life, friends that I have decades of history with. We built a great life out here. So the one thing I learned, Matej, is that any decisions you make with your family in mind, first and foremost, there might be a little bit of sting that comes with those decisions, right? A little bit of sacrifice, but what there won't be is regret. So I've experienced that sting a little bit here and there. I wonder, what could have been, what could I have done? That stings a little bit sometimes, but there's no regret, because I look around me and see the family life that we have, and I'm happy with my decisions, and I do it all the same. And I've been able to accomplish lots. I feel proud of what I've been able to accomplish from here in Edmonton.
Have you ever had this kind of conversation with any colleagues or coworkers who have had to make that move from Western Canada, and how have they usually gone?
Yeah, well, Dregs and I have it all the time. We, I bug him about how much he's turned into he was a Western Canadian before. He's full on Ontarian now. He comes back west, he's complaining about the weather, and he doesn't like this and that. And I talked to him about how soft he's got, and it's just jokes, obviously. I mean, listen, the conversation goes great. I don't begrudge anybody who's made that decision, and lots of people have made that decision, and it's been amazing for them. And they go there and they build a great life, and they've had tons of career success. and, you make the best of it. And had I moved to Toronto, I would have made the best of it. So I completely respect the decisions that all of my colleagues have made. And in particular, the Western Canadians who have moved out to, to that part of the world where there's so much more opportunity right in front of you, right? You live in those markets where the main networks are, and people have made great careers and had great family lives. And so, I don't think I'm smarter than everybody else. It was just the path that I chose, and I'm happy with my path. And I just wish everyone the best on theirs. And I see tons of happiness that's come from people who've made that move, that I chose not to make.
How many cities would you say that you've been to in Canada because of your work and travel with TSN?
Oh, man. I've never been asked that. If I do a guess, I don't know. Gotta be, I don't know, 50, 70, 100. I don't know, man. Because I don't just do, I was grinding it out for a little while doing, play-by-play, Hockey Canada events and stuff in smaller towns. And man, I've been all over the place. I've been through junior towns. I've been through, lots of different cities. So I don't know, lots and lots. I've seen a ton of the country. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to get out on the road and, and go see a new place, from Fort St. John to Prince George to, man, a bunch of different cities in, I think, Steinbach, Manitoba to,
Steinbach,
all over
correct.
the place, man. I've been all over the place. And that's one of the really cool things about the job, is you get to see a lot of different places. And it's pretty neat.
Would you say that you've been to every province in Canada then?
No, I haven't been to Whitehorse. I've been up north. Newfoundland. I think I still have a little bit to do out on the East Coast, I would say. But I've been to most of them for sure. For sure.
And since you've been to a lot, obviously it's hard to maybe choose off the top of your head, but are there any ones that jump out right away off the top of your brain that were really memorable, or you had a really amazing experience that maybe you didn't expect to have at first?
Yeah, well, we went up to Whitehorse when we did TSN's version of kind of like Hockey Day in Canada years and years and years ago. And when we had the national rights, and I went up there with a good buddy, Chris Edwards, who's now one of our lead producers on the CFL and on NHL hockey. And he was just getting started at TSN, and so was I. And we just had a ton of fun up there. The people were so nice. And we met so many people. They were so excited that we were there. They welcomed us into the town. It was just really, really cool. The landscape was amazing. The people were great. So I really enjoyed that. I've always enjoyed my time on Vancouver Island. There's a bunch of different little places you get to and really cool little towns. So I've always really enjoyed that. I mean, British Columbia is pretty spectacular when you get into certain areas. So I would probably point to those two, I would say. And then, I mean, my first trip to Montreal and in old Montreal and Quebec City, that's pretty unique that all Canadians should try and see if they can.
Growing up in Edmonton, you must have been a huge hockey fan, I'm sure, if
Yep.
cheering for the Oilers. What was your sports experience like as a kid, watching as a fan and also playing?
Yeah. So, I grew up an Oiler fan for sure. I won't deny that. Obviously, you have to trade that ticket in when you take a job covering the team. So it's been a long time since I've cheered for anything. But I grew up big Oiler fan, cried when Steve Smith scored on himself back when I was a little kid. Watching Gretzky and Messier and those guys. One of my favorite players all time was Marty Jelena when he won the Stanley Cup as part of the kid line. Adam Graves and I think Murphy were on that line. So grew up watching tons of hockey, playing tons of, hand hockey in my basement in Prince George. I was Grant Fuhr and my brother was John Van Beesbrook, and, shooting on each other and just playing hours and hours. I mean, the typical Canadian hockey loving kids upbringing. I was fortunate enough to play, hockey at a reasonably decent level, played some major junior and Kamloops. So I kind of had that junior hockey experience. So yeah, it was a pretty fulsome sports experience, bit of high school volleyball. Other than that, I was pretty focused on hockey.
What was your experience like with football growing up in Edmonton? Because I know the people who love hockey, that's first and foremost, especially in the City of Champions. They got that
Yeah.
nickname because, I mean, people will think of the Oilers when they hear City of Champions, not, Edmonton's 5 in a row. But what was your experience like with football growing up in Edmonton?
Yeah, it wasn't, and to be clear, like I was here for grade 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then I moved to Kamloops. And then when I was 1, I moved to Prince George. So the time I was 1 to grade 5 was in Prince George. So I spent a little bit of like, about 4 or 5 years here, 5 or 6 years here, whatever it is, until we moved back. I would say I went to the odd game, wasn't a huge fan and didn't watch it on TV. It just wasn't part of my upbringing. I was all about hockey, then golf in the summers. But obviously became very aware of it when I moved here for work. And I spent some time working in Saskatchewan too. So I covered the CFL. That was my first experience covering the CFL. But just sort of grew to really enjoy the sport. Really cool getting to see it from the sidelines once I started at TSN. And it's been a fairly significant part of my job here in Edmonton. And I enjoy it. It's been really cool. But I mean, full disclosure, I've been a hockey guy at heart for basically my entire life.
What was your favorite memory then of watching hockey or even playing hockey as a kid, like up to 18 years old?
Won a provincial championships in midget AAA with a group of my really, really close friends, a bunch of guys I'm still buddies with to this day. So that was just spectacular. When I played in Kamloops in the Western Hockey League playoff series against Tri-Cities, I sat the whole first round, and then I ended up playing in the second round. And I scored in back-to-back games in games 4 and 5 of a best-of-5 series, and we ended up winning that. So that was pretty fantastic for, to play playoff hockey and to contribute. So that was pretty cool. That whole year in the Western Hockey League that I played was pretty memorable and pretty fun. So I'd say the provincial championship in that year and the dub were kind of highlights of my career for sure. I also busted open Kevin Lowe's chin at training camp one year. He was skating with the Blazers one year because I think there was a contract dispute with the Rangers. So main camp had started. I was 16 years old, and he was out, staying in shape by skating with us at camp. Did a one-on-one drill with him. I cut across the blue line and fired a backhand, and I snapped open his chin, and he was bleeding into his hand, and I felt terrible. We sort of had a laugh about it. And I saw him the next day, and I looked at him. I said, "You come back for more?" And he just laughed. Like, obviously, Kevin is such a nice guy. And then it was funny years later recounting that story. He didn't remember me from camp, but he knew me as the local reporter. And then I was like, somebody said, "Well, you remember Ryan played in Kamloops, right?" And he was at training camp. Stu McGregor, my GM in Kamloops at the time, who was working for the Oilers. And Kevin was like, "What?" I said, yeah, your chin, that scar in your chin. I can see it there. He's like, "You remembered." So it was kind of a funny little moment with Kevin Lowe where I busted him open pretty good.
Is that something that happens very often, or that you've at least noticed in your career, where you have those full circle moments of whether it's being a player or even a fan as a kid, and then all of a sudden, like 10, 15 years later, you're in a spot where you're like, holy, like I feel like life has come full circle.
Yeah, I've had a few. I mean, when I was playing midget AAA in Kamloops, one of our fundraisers was to sell popcorn and Pepsi in the stands at Blazer games. And so, the Blazers won the Memorial Cup at home that year. And one of my good friends was playing on the team, and he was skating around hoisting the Memorial Cup like this. And I was in the stands with a Pepsi hat on selling popcorn and Pepsi. And then the next year I found myself playing for the team. So that was kind of with him. So that was a pretty surreal sort of moment for me, when I was on the other side of that the following year. Yeah, and I would say, the first time I interviewed Wayne Gretzky, the first time I interviewed Mario Lemieux, you definitely have those moments where you're like, oh man, like I'm really doing this. This is sort of for real. The first time you actually get to sit and have a beer with Wayne Gretzky and talk hockey with him, in a group, and you listen more than you talk. But little moments like that where you kind of go, yeah, this is pretty cool. You find yourself at, world championships in Russia and having dinner with, some of the brain trust of the team, and, sitting across the table from Steve Yzerman, and, and you're kind of just listening to them all talk. Like, I've been really lucky to have met some really, really neat people and had the opportunity to sit in on a lot of really interesting conversations. I'm not the guy to try and run the conversation at the table, but I like to listen.
Those moments are truly spectacular. When you reflect on them, I think in the context of what the 10-year-old version of Ryan would have thought, because in the moment you're like, oh, this is where I should be. But when you think in contrast with where you were to where you are, I think that's what makes it crazier rather than the moment itself. Because when you're in the moment itself, it's just like, oh, like I'm just sitting here and we're chatting with Wayne Gretzky, you know?
Yeah, I think, I was the kid who at 8, 9 years old had the tape recorder and was like, you're listening to John Short on the radio, and give us a call to our talk. Like I did little pretend talk shows. Like I interviewed my younger brother. I was like, you be Grant Fuhr, I'm going to interview you. So my 8, 9, 10-year-old self sort of had visions of, I just knew I was really into that stuff. So if I were to fast forward to my 30-year-old self and reflect back on it, it's like, yeah, it's pretty cool that it, kind of came full circle and that I was able to make a go of it, because I was definitely always really interested at it, at getting at it from a young age.
You've covered some stories that through your time at TSN that have also been a little bit heavier in terms of the context that they carry, in particular Forever 29, about the Humboldt Broncos bus crash that,
Yep.
where 29 players lost their lives. And it was a very tragic event that was heard across the entire country. And you were able to have a hand in that. What was the experience like for you working on something that had people carrying a heavier heart than normal?
Yeah, it was very, very different. And it was really intense. 29 Forever was the documentary. And, the number 29 signifies the number that was on the bus. 16 lost their lives that day. And it was tough, man. I was there the day after it happened. And basically, probably over the course of the next 2 years, working on a combination of our documentary and our game broadcast and a bunch of features. And I basically was there probably another 9 or 10 times, spent hundreds of hours working on this content. And it was really, really difficult stuff. It was really, I got to know the families extremely well, made some lifelong friendships in the process. Just grew to respect and appreciate the grace and the dignity that, those people were dealing with the worst life could have given them. Yet showing so much grace and class through it. Honored that they would share their stories with us, honored that they would share their memories of their loved ones with us. Just really humbled and honored that they trusted us in the way that they did to tell their story. And really, really difficult work. Not about me. But the truth is it definitely left a pretty significant mark on me. Had some untangling I had to do afterwards, had some grief counseling and some mental health issues that I needed to deal with in the months that followed, really enduring that whole process. I learned a lot about secondary grief and the effect that can have on you. So again, it's about them, it's about the families and those who were lost. But when I get asked about that, I do think it's appropriate and important to say that, no matter where your pain or your difficulty is coming from, when you are having problems and you're having problems and you're not yourself, it's really important to reach out and ask for help. And that's, that's one of the things that I learned through that process was, I definitely needed some help getting through. I was a father of young teenage boys. A lot my boys were similar in age to a lot of the boys who passed away, and Dana Bronze. So yeah, it was a pretty harrowing experience. Some of the most meaningful work of my career, work I hope I never have to do again. And it was a real grind to get through that. You can see my Humboldt blanket on the shelf right behind me there, that the families sent that to me, and that will always have a place on my shelf there.
You talk about secondary grief and having boys who are close in age. I can only imagine, I mean, as a father, what that feels like, and just reflecting on just this scenario as to what happened and what you're how much more, your kids in that moment would mean to you because of knowing how precious life is, and that's no one is ever guaranteed tomorrow. And I think that's the thing that's the one of the scariest realities of those kinds of stories, because people always say you have a lot of time, and then life happens and you realize you don't really have a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having spent a lot of time with people who, had such an incredibly devastating event happen to them out of the blue, but that phone call came just one day, that phone call we all dread, and it happened for them. And having to process through that with them, and having to have them relay those stories and tell me about the moment, asking people to tell you about the moment. And, people who were willing to talk about it were the only people I ever asked that question to, and that I had permission to ask that question to. But some really, really difficult, some difficult stories and some difficult stuff. And so for me, the way it manifested for me was I had a really tough time not catastrophizing in my own mind. Thinking about the worst happening to my boys or my stepkids. You know, um, all sorts of dreams and all sorts of it was to the point, it was so bad where I couldn't even be in the room with my kids when things got bad. I would just tear up and I would have to leave. And that's when my family kind of stepped in and said, okay, like, it's time for you to get some help for this, because honestly, you feel silly asking for help because you see all that these other people are going through, and you're like, I don't like, this is nothing what I'm dealing with compared to them. But the truth is that secondary grief is a real thing, and secondary trauma is a real thing, and had a dramatic effect on me, and it was something I needed to get help for. But listening to people tell those stories of that worst moment you can imagine happening to them just really dramatically impacted me. And I appreciate the fact that they were willing to share those stories with us, and it was a huge honor and a huge responsibility, and I'm proud of the work we did. um, and like I said, I still have some really great relationships from that time that I'm really thankful for.
How would you say that that's changed your perspective on, or if it has in any way, on the way that you have done your work from that moment going forward?
Yeah, really good question. You know, like, I'm back in the toy box now, right? Like, let's be honest. What I do day to day, it's fun. You're covering sports, you're asking questions. Sometimes you got to ask tough questions, and you can piss people off now and then, whatever. But I mean, really, covering the NHL, covering the CFL, covering sports for a living day to day, the machinations of it are pretty lighthearted. And so I think I have an appreciation for when I get to just be in that space and just, it's lighthearted. So I think there's an appreciation there. But there has also been some more difficult storytelling that's had to happen here, in recent years with hockey, whether it's the great reporting done by Rick Westhead and Kitty Strang, and a number of other reporters on some of the difficulty that's been experienced by people that have come up through the game. I think I have a little bit of experience digging in on the tougher end of things. And so when those things come up, and it's time to start pitching in on those things, and I have a little bit here and there, I just think you're ready to do what you need to do. So I think I have a day-to-day appreciation for the lightheartedness of what we do, but I'm also prepared to jump in when you need to jump in, because at the end of the day, we're journalists and we have a job to do. And whatever the content is, you got to dig in and do your best and pour what you have into it.
And I know that you have recently started a content venture of your own with Got Your Back pod. You've been doing that now for, I believe, since March, and
Yep.
you've been working with Struddy, and also James Duthie and Dregs have been on as well. And the content you guys put out, just about, besides hockey, regular people doing incredible things to help each other out. What inspired you to start the podcast, and how has
Yeah.
the experience been?
Yeah. It's been awesome. Like, I don't know about you. Like, how do you like doing your pod?
I mean, I think it's just a really cool opportunity to talk to a lot of people. And I think that
Yeah.
sometimes there's a lot of conversations that are that are left off the record that could help others or people could find entertaining. You never know,
Yeah.
right?
It's a different format, right? And it's your own thing. So what I'd say is it's rejuvenated me. Not that I was like dying on the vine or anything, but I mean through COVID, right? I think I kind of had that lull. And I'll be honest with you, the negativity on social media has always it's always bothered me. And I've tried to not dig into it too much and get too bothered by it. But through COVID, I really found it started to weigh me down because I think the vitriol got a lot more intense. And Edmonton Twitter can be pretty rough sometimes. It's a pretty vocal group and they love their team, but it can be like everything. It can be, Twitter is it's not a real healthy place a lot of the time.
No.
And so what I found was I just kind of withdrew. I made some mistakes on Twitter and I learned some tough lessons. I had to make some apologies. And I learned some mistakes on Twitter. And what I found was I just didn't want to engage anymore because I didn't want to accidentally make more mistakes because I just didn't like that feeling. I didn't like, I was just unsure of where to step. And so I just withdrew. So there was a long time, probably a good year and a half where like you look at my Twitter feed, it was like basically just like lineup updates and breaking news. And that was about it. I just completely disengaged from social media entirely. And then, I got thinking, and I've been thinking about a podcast for a while. And I got thinking, I've worked way too long and way too hard to build up my platform here in Edmonton. I have a really healthy social media following. I've got a voice here in this market. And it just kind of pissed me off. I'm like, I've been chased into a corner and I'm freaking hiding now. It's silly. So I decided like, okay, time to re-engage here and time to get into something. But I made the decision that if I was going to re-engage, I was going to kind of do it on my own terms. And I was going to have the conversations that I wanted to have. And some people might like them. And some people might roll their eyes and think that's so corny and ridiculous. And that's okay. Because it's what I want to talk about. So I decided on our podcast, we're going to talk Oilers and we'll do what we got to do. We'll rip them if we got to rip them, praise them when it's time to praise them. We'll talk hockey. And Strudwick is fantastic. But the other thing I decided I wanted to do was have some uplifting storytelling. And I love hearing stories about people having each other's backs. It gives me goosebumps, gives me tingles. It always has. And so what I found was that everybody seems to have one of those stories. Like everybody's got a story about a time in their life where, it can be big and small, can be goofy, funny, can be whatever. Everybody's got that story where they're like, yeah, I was in a jam there and so did this and came through for me. And they love telling those stories because now you get to like shine a light on someone else that did something cool for you. And I love hearing those stories because they're just awesome to hear. So we just decided to create a space where we were going to tell those signature type of stories. And the segment is Who's Got Your Back? And we have listeners that send us emails with stories about a time when someone had their back. All of our guests that we have on the podcast, that's the last question we ask them. Okay, give us your Got Your Back story. And we've had so much fun with it. We've had some great stories. I love the content. So I don't know how everybody else feels about it. Like people might be rolling their eyes and clicking it off. I don't know. The response we've gotten has been fantastic. And I love the content. And so we're going to keep doing it because it's tons of fun. Might even have a little expansion this year. We'll see. Some things are in the works.
So I must ask then, what's the best Got Your Back story from one of the three, from Dregs, James Duthie, or from Strudwick? In terms of them having your back.
Oh, them having my back.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I mean, yeah. Yeah, like Dregs has had my back many times over the years. I remember I was working the Stanley Cup playoffs, would have been like maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I remember I was Montreal. What was the series? I can't remember which one it was. Anyways, I'd been grinding for 3 straight rounds and things were getting messy at home. My kids were having a hard time. They were missing me. I was having a hard time. I was super emotional. and a new series was starting, and I had to go straight from one series to the next. And I remember I landed in New York, and I was in a taxi with Dregs, and my son phoned me, and I don't know why I answered it on speaker, and immediately he was in tears, and he was like, something he'd had a hard time, and he was young, and something was really bothering him. He was in tears, and when are you coming home, Dad? And I was just gutted. And, so I'm breaking up, I'm in tears, and Greg's just sitting there like, holy shit. So unbeknownst to me, one of our bosses was flying in the next day. And when he got there, Dregs went to him and said, listen, if there's any way we can get Rish home, like, we got to get him home. This has been 3.5 weeks. It's been too much. I know he's digging in on the family front. He'll never ask himself, but if we can get him home, we got to get him a break. And so my producer called me, met me in the lobby, and Mike Lane was his name. And he was like, look, we're sending you home. And I was like, no, I can do this. And I can. He's like, no. You're good, man. You're good. Like, you've been awesome. Go home, take like a 4 or 5 day break. Tell us when you're ready to come back. And I was on a plane that night, and they sent me home. I went home. I think I was home for about 72 hours, reset the kids, got things square on the home front, re-engaged in the playoffs, and was doing much better work after that. So that's just a story about a great friend, a great human being in Darren Dreger, recognizing the situation, having my back, and having a difficult conversation for me that I probably never would have had on my own.
Well, that there's no other thing I can really say, but that's what friends are for. And I think that, you got your back, and then I got your back. And the way that works is, it's so helpful in something like sports media, where stuff is on the fly and it's go. And there's times where you can't really think about anything else but your job. And we as human beings aren't really programmed to be like that all the time. And it can be very difficult, especially if you have a family, especially if you're far away from them too. It's not like your kids were 35 and they're married and have kids. Like, it's important for development, right? And like, you want your mom and dad to be there. So it's important to have your parents be there and have your back too, right? So everyone's got to have each other's back.
Yeah, for sure. And like, listen, some of the stories that people have told have been, heavy stuff. And we appreciate and we welcome those stories, where people have been through all sorts of challenges and they've shared those challenges with us, and, the amazing ways that people in their lives have stepped up. Others have just been goofy and funny and lighthearted. And we welcome all of those types of stories on our podcast, because, there's a lot of negative content out there, and social media, it has a tendency to really to spin negative. And if you want to engage, there's plenty out there to seek out. And we just decided to let's just create a space to put some positive vibes out there. And, for those who need it, they'll listen to it. For those who don't, maybe they'll just come for the hockey and move on. But we've gotten lots of really good feedback, and I've gotten lots of feedback from people who appreciate the segment and appreciate the idea. And I'm really proud of it. And I really appreciate all the people who've come on and shared with us. And I can't wait to do another entire season. I'm really excited to go start to finish with the Oilers season this year with Got Yer Back YEG. That's Got Yer Back Edmonton. And Struds is on board, and we're ready to rock and roll. So yeah, I'm really excited, man.
It just seems like a weird coincidence that some of the best work that's done, there's a lot of amazing work that's done, but I just find that particularly in Edmonton, the guys who work there, whether it be with TSN or on the radio or on TV, all have such a unique flavor that they bring to sports media, whether it's, Jason Gregg, or whether it's Strudwick or yourself, or, even someone like Dustin Nielsen. Like, I don't know what's in the water in Edmonton, but you guys all got a lot of good things going, and great charisma to bring a lot of entertainment and happiness and to all the sports fans out in Western Canada. And I just find that it's very, very unique. And, whether it's the AM Nasty with Dusty, or whether it's like those kinds of things, I think are really what makes sports even better, is because, yes, like, there's wins and losses, and are the Oilers going to win the Stanley Cup? Yes or no? It's a black and white, answer. But when you see these kinds of things that connect fans to the game, especially with your podcast, or whether it's calling on the radio, I think that is what sports fans really live for. If even if they don't always know it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. And listen, Edmonton's a really good media market. Like there's some, to your point, we have some really talented, really high quality people in this town. And, you mentioned Dustin Nielsen, and really the radio station over there is full of them, from Dave Jameson and Low Tide, Matawanek, like Jason Greger, Struds does stuff on the radio station too. Even over on the other station, Stauffer. I mean, he's been around forever. He's just an absolute fountain of knowledge. Rob Brown does a great job. The broadcast crews are great. The job that Gene does, and Jack Michaels, and Speck's been writing for Sportsnet forever. Like, yeah, there's, I mean, Edmonton Twitter would probably disagree because, often we're under fire from them, but whatever, that is just what it is. But no, I like our media group, and I think we got some really talented people here. I love doing the shows that I do. I love having them on my podcast. It's definitely been a great experience working with all these folks. And yeah, it's a good, solid media market, but honestly, Vancouver is as well, and Calgary and Winnipeg, and like Canadian hockey cities, there's passion, right? And there's tons of passion from the fans here in Edmonton. And that's the other thing. Like I talk a lot about the negativity on Twitter, but really it's like maybe 10 or 15% of the people on Twitter that are actually vocally negative. And, so many of my followers and so many people who I engage with on Twitter are amazing and so well-reasoned and well thought. And I love the conversations I get to have. It really is a good market. And honestly, I should stop focusing so much and stop mentioning so much the negativity that's on Twitter, because it is such a small part. So mental note for me, I'm going to get off that.
Ryan, we are getting towards the end of our time on today's episode, so I wanted to have a few quick wrap-up questions to have a little bit more fun before we go.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. We're ready to go here. Any trick questions coming at me? You gonna throw some heat at me, or the softballs? What do you got, Matej?
I don't think it'll be any tricks, depending on all based on your perception. So I need to ask: is a hot dog a sandwich? Yes or no?
No. Hot dog's a hot dog. It's its own category. Of course, it's not a sandwich. Don't be silly. Next question.
Favorite movie?
What was the one Leonardo DiCaprio years ago? Inception?
Yeah, that's he's an Inception.
I think that's the name of it. Yeah, just a brilliant Leonardo DiCaprio movie. I loved Dune. I thought Dune was fantastic. I'm a bit of a sci-fi nerd too, though. So, all the Star Wars, all that stuff. Even the Top Gun remake was pretty awesome. But I'm going to go with Inception by Leonardo DiCaprio. I'll watch that anytime I see it on TV. I'll watch that.
Best sports movie?
Best sports movie. I liked. Slapshot is kind of a classic, so it's up there for me just because it's such a classic. What was the one where Al Pacino was a football coach?
Any Given Sunday.
Any Given Sunday. I thought that had a good storyline to it, and I love Jerry Maguire too. So yeah, something in that mix.
If you had the opportunity to play on a line alongside any former famous NHL player besides Wayne Gretzky, who would it be and why?
Connor McDavid. Just because he's like nothing we've ever seen before. So I would put him there, and I would probably I'm a right winger. I guess we'll say position doesn't have to matter. I would probably say, yeah, let's go McDavid and Gordie Howe.
Favorite memory that you've had spending time with your whole family, your whole immediate family, kids, partner?
Oh, look at that. Let me think about that one. Took the whole crew to Disney World. It's a tough memory because it was the year my dad passed away very unexpectedly, and he was supposed to be on that trip with us. But we went, and Mom came, and we had a blast. We did a 9-day trip to Disney, 2 days of travel, 7 days of theme parks. It was ridiculous. It was my wife and my stepkids and my kids, and they're Disney maniacs. And so when we said we're going to Disney, I was like, all right, great. Like, let's share. Yeah. So what are we, like, a couple of days in the park or whatever? And she's like, no. We fly there. We go to Disney for 7 days. We fly home. So as much as it was pretty overwhelming and expensive as hell, that was just an amazing, amazing trip that we'll never forget.
I know that this one may not be super quick to jump off the top of the head as well, but
Sure.
what is your favorite memory that you have with your dad?
Oh, my dad took me fishing when I was a kid once. He could only take one of us, and there were three brothers. There was three of us at the time. We're now four because we adopted another along the way. There was three of us at the time, and I can't remember why, but Dad picked me. And so we, do I got a picture? Yeah, one sec, I got a picture.
All right, let's go. We got a picture.
And so Dad took me on the fishing trip. And here's a picture of the two of us. I'll see if you can, how can I show you that so you can see? Oh, no, the light.
Oh, there we go.
There
Yeah,
you can,
no, you can just
hang on. There you can kind of see.
Look at that.
So there's Les. And he took me on a fishing trip out on the ocean. And this is the Man in the Glass poem.
Classic poem.
Yeah. So my dad lived by these words, and we all have been given pictures of us with our dads and with this poem. And so that's a keepsake that me and my brothers all have. We've done the same for our teenage boys as they graduate on to becoming men at 18. My brother's passed it on to his kids and so on. So, yep, fishing with Dad out on the Pacific Ocean, caught a great big halibut. I'll never forget. And it was like 4 or 5 days of just alone time with my dad and I. So that's probably the biggest one. And my brothers are still jealous I got to go, and they can't figure out why I got picked. So screw them. He liked me best.
I've heard through the grapevine, is it true that you are a master of linguistics?
No. What? Where did you hear that? That's a bad scoop. Or are you being a smart ass?
I just remember reading something once on Twitter, and I think it might have been a funny joke, and I figured it's been burned into my brain ever since I saw it, and I was like, I have to ask him. I think it was it was a clip of a reporter on Twitter who he was saying the same report about something that had happened, and he did it in like 8 to 10 languages.
No.
And then James Duthie quote tweeted it saying like, Brian Rishaug has the talent to do this. He may not, he may say that he can't.
Being a dumbass. That's just James being a donkey. That's just him trying to draw me into something on some stupid thing online. The one thing, and this is not a great story for me to tell, but if you listen to Edmonton radio ever, you probably heard this. Not only am I not a master of linguistics, but I struggle with mathematics as well. I was interviewing a guy, I can't remember who I was interviewing, in a CFL game at halftime. And I said, I think the score was, I'm going to screw up the math again here. Every time I try and tell this story, I screw up the math again, which makes it funnier. The score was 13-21 for the other team. So 21-13 was the score, which means, yeah. So I said, hey man, down by 11 at the half, what's your coach saying? What did your coach say in the locker room? And he goes, man, we're only down by 9. Like, he corrected my math live on the air. And so I just get killed for that. Nielsen plays it all the time on his show, and I just get killed for being terrible at math. But I did it. It happened. It was a bad mistake, and I am terrible at math. So no on the linguistics and no on the math.
Well, one thing I can tell for sure then is that all the crew at TSN have a great sense of humor, and that they're definitely very well equipped to come up with quick jokes whenever it comes to any of their colleagues.
Oh yeah. James is the worst. He is so chirpy. He won't do a thing on Twitter for weeks on end. And then all of a sudden he'll just right out of left field, just nuke somebody in a smart ass way that only James can do. Dregs, it's the same thing too. Like, the thing about Dregs and Duthie is they're really close buddies. And so I was so pumped to have them on my podcast this year in a regular segment because we talked a lot about hockey, but it was a lot of BS as well. We played some goofy games and had some fun, told a lot of jokes, and we're just mucking around. And it was a really fun segment. So again, I don't know if anybody enjoyed it or not, but we had a hell of a lot of fun doing it. So hoping to keep rolling with those guys again this year.
Who's the funnier of the two?
They're funny in different ways. James is funny. Like if there's a really funny line to be found in a situation, James can find it and find it quickly. Dregs is just really snappy with the chirps. So like Dregs is just, it's so annoying because if you ever get into it with him, he cuts you so fast and so accurately, and he cuts you to the core, and he is so quick with it. It just kills you. Like, I remember one time I was telling him, I don't know why I was telling him. I said to him, I'm trying something different with my hair. And like, didn't even skip a beat. He just goes, comb over. And because he always chirps me about the fact that my hairline is like, that's why I'm wearing a hat. My hairline's like working its way back. But just like didn't even skip a beat, comb over. And it's little things like that where he's just so good at just ripping you to your core on the spot. So it's a different sense of humor. I hate both of them, and I'm annoyed by both of them equally. Their senses of humor, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I can only sit. I mean, if those two guys are jokesters and Dusty's ripping you for math, and I can only imagine what's going on at TSN 1260 every single morning with his show.
Oh yeah. No, like but it's good, right? It's camaraderie, and people don't mind hearing people get chirped. I think we're serious when we need to be. We have fun when we can, and it's really good, man. Like I said, we're in the toy box, right? You gotta have some fun, gotta relax, gotta keep it light. We'll get serious when we need to, but day to day, we just kind of try and do our jobs and have a bit of fun.
Ryan, I want to thank you for having been on today's episode. It was super awesome to get to chat with you about running your pod, life growing up in Edmonton, and the life of working across Canada and getting a chance to be in the toy department, like you said, and be able to experience and tell so many incredible stories.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. And I have to say, you're a really good interviewer. Like I do lots of podcasts, and there's lots of great interviewers out there. I'm impressed, man. You asked some really like intelligent, piercing questions. You had me on my toes. This was a lot of fun, man. I look forward to listening to more of your podcast now that I've been on it. So thanks for having me on, bud.
I appreciate that very much. And I also am thankful for the listener for enjoying today's episode with TSN Bureau reporter in Edmonton, Ryan Rishaug.